Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Welcome into another Daily Faceoff Live playoff edition of the show. It's brought to you by Bet365, our sports betting partner for these 2024 playoffs. We'll be here with Bet365 to give you all the news, analysis, lines, and betting options for the playoffs until just one of these four teams is left standing at the end of June. Tyler Yaremchuk and Frank Seravalli streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, where we need an inbox question. So drop those in for Frank with the hashtag AskDFO. Frank, welcome back to Edmonton.
Thank you. Always good to be here. I don't know why my head's cut off, but
Yeah, we
that's
really zoomed in.
quite normal. It feels like I walk around with my head cut off some days. Look, unbelievable atmosphere in Edmonton, Rogers Place for Game 3, and certainly lots of questions and disappointment today.
Yeah, we are going to get into that in a bit here. So let's we're going to be joined by Stephen Ellis in a second, but let's get into this game between the Oilers and the Dallas Stars. Frank, it was 2-0 Oilers through the first period. The Rogers Place crowd was absolutely buzzing. And then the second period came. If there was a meter where it's the Stars pushed it and brought it, the Oilers collapsed, where would you go on that meter?
I would go... Wow. I don't know what I would do there, because as impressive as the Stars push was, it was really more about the Oilers collapsing. Yeah. Like, here, this is the biggest thing that I've struggled with. And look, there's a million questions to ask today if you're an Oiler fan. How exactly did that game winner go in on Stuart Skinner? Why did Chris Knoblauch not call a timeout in the second period during this onslaught? You got to try and find any way to halt the momentum, right? Yeah. So if you're getting hemmed in your own end, you need a break. You need something to try and offset that. So then the next question is, if you are the Oilers and you knew the Stars were going to push back as the best road team in the NHL, why were you so ill-equipped to handle it? Why were you so unprepared for it? And then maybe sort of the overarching question today is, what's happened to Darnell Nurse?
Man, I mean, that pairing with him and Cody Ceci, and to maybe tie it back to Knoblauch, like I gave Chris Knoblauch a lot of credit at the end of the Vancouver series when you sat there and said, okay, he did a great job making an on-the-fly adjustment with his D pairings in that series. In Game 6, he did a good job, he was using his timeouts. Game 7, he called a big timeout. Like, that seemed to work well for the Oilers. Then you look at yesterday, and it's like they just reverted back to their old form and their old problems where, they weren't mentally strong enough to push through that gap. Chris Knoblauch, for some reason, went back to Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci in that game, and it immediately didn't work. Like, that stretch of 8 minutes before it eventually led, and Dallas's first goal was in there, that started because Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci got hemmed in their own zone and could not make a play to break up the cycle. So I'm coming out of that game. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. You mentioned Skinner. I think Chris Knoblauch wears a lot of that for some of the in-game decisions that he made. And this Oilers blue line just couldn't figure it out. And with Nurse and Ceci, there's nothing you can do. Like,
you can't insulate a $9.25 million defenseman.
You can try run 4D tomorrow, but I wouldn't feel great about having Vinny Desharnais play 20 minutes either. So
he might be out of the lineup. Yeah. Like, you could make the case that Desharnais should come out, and against a Stars team that plays fast, that Philip Broberg should be the guy that goes in.
Or do you do something you haven't done yet in the Chris Knoblauch era, and that's run 11-7 and just say, hey, we're going to see 4 or 5 of these 7. Someone's got to be good. And you just run 7D and you go with the 11 forwards, and it's a Connor McDavid 30-minute special in tomorrow night.
And look, so we can get caught up in all the different questions surrounding the Oilers, but the Stars deserve a ton of. That's why the question was so interesting, because the Stars deserve a ton of praise. Like,
hello, Jason Robertson.
Hello, Rupe Hintz.
Yeah,
I mean, he was the game changer that maybe unlocked Jason Robertson, who had kind of gone through this goal scoring drought that hadn't really been a force these playoffs. He gets a hat trick. And Rupe Hintz picks up a couple assists, and he looks like he never missed a beat. And I love what Pete DeBoer said after the game, in that he may not be Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, but for this Dallas Stars team, Rupe Hintz is he's their number one center. He is their Zibanejad or Barkov, or pick another player that's playing in these Stanley Cup playoffs that the Stars haven't had for the last 5 or 6 games. Yeah. And so not only did they snuff out the Colorado Avalanche without their number one center, but they were able to draw even through the first 2 games against the Edmonton Oilers in round 3. And then they get him back. And now the Stars team, which they're like a freight train rolling downhill, the Oilers now have to try and find a way to stop that Stars team from, continuing to push. And that's going to be really difficult. It feels like a missed opportunity for Edmonton. And it feels like this is what Dallas has done all playoffs.
Yeah, Edmonton now has to win 3 of the next 4. And if you're Dallas, man, are you ever feeling confident? You got home ice back. First time these playoffs, Jake Ottinger on the road has allowed 3 or more goals in a hockey game. And you're Dallas, you're sitting there going, hey, we still won. We didn't need, Jake Ottinger to carry us or anything like that. That was a team win, a great comeback. They survived that Edmonton push. The Stars do deserve a ton of credit. That series 2-1 with game 4 going tomorrow night in downtown Edmonton. Frank, tonight is game 4 between the Cats and Rangers, and it's the Florida Panthers who are in the same spot that the Oilers will be tomorrow. They're down 2-1 after a really, really convincing game 1 victory. They come out and drop the next 2 in overtime. The margins in this series are razor thin. A big part of that has been Igor Shesterkin. I saw a great tweet from a Rangers fan who was like, man, we're getting some great performances from Igor and Kreider and Igor and Zibanejad and Igor. And it's like, yeah, he deserves a ton of love here. The Panthers at all situations have controlled 57% of the shot attempts in this series, but they're down 2-1. There's no reason to panic because you're only down 2-1, but still, tonight is a massive pivotal. It's the swing game. Game 4 always is.
It sometimes is. It's not always the swing game. And what I would say is I'm not very concerned for the Panthers because of their process. You look at, it's not just shot attempts, it's also control of play. And I think that they're in a great spot. You continue to push and push and push, and you get more on net as opposed to blocked or miss the net. And all of a sudden you're creating a whole different set of worries for Igor Shesterkin. And that's really the tough spot that the Rangers are going to have to defend better. We know the Panthers are the better team 5-on-5. Special teams, the Rangers have an advantage. And can the Panthers continue to grind through what's been a tough nut to crack in Shesterkin?
Yeah, from a Rangers perspective, I mean, they're maybe sitting there in a spot going, whew, squeaked out those 2 OT wins. We maybe haven't even brought our best yet in this series.
That's the exciting part for them,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're thinking exactly that. We've been okay. We haven't been unbelievable. What if we just turn in a signature performance now? Now we are 3-1, and we are 1 win away from going to the Stanley Cup final for the first time in 10 years. And that's kind of what I think maybe got to Edmonton's head a little bit in game 3.
You were up 2-0.
You're up 2-0 at the end of the first period, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I wonder if we could, we could be up 3-1 on Wednesday night. And all of a sudden, like, you begin to get wrapped up in that you forget what's at stake. And this Panthers team is hungry. Like, I don't think they're going to have any issue being ready to play. They've gotten to the Cup final before. They want to get back there again and this time change the narrative.
Yeah, I have absolute full confidence in Paul Maurice being able to get that team going for a big performance tonight in game 4. I'll give my picks for that in our Bet365 daily bets coming up in a bit on the show, Frank. But let's turn our attention away from the Stanley Cup playoffs for a little bit here. Today, we are expecting Dan Bilesba to be introduced as the 2nd ever head coach of the Seattle Kraken. The organization moved on from David Hackstall about a month ago, and they found their guy somewhat internally. Bilesma, of course, as you remember, won a Stanley Cup his first ever year as an NHL head coach back in 08-09. He ended up spending 6 years with the Pittsburgh Penguins before having a couple as the head coach in Buffalo. Eventually was on the Red Wings bench for a bit, but he got a head coaching job back with Coachella Valley of the American Hockey League a couple years ago when the Kraken organization came and had their AHL team created down there. He did a great job with Coachella Valley, too. That's a team that made the Calder Cup finals last year under his watch, and now he's getting another crack in the big leagues. Is this the right man for the job? Do you like that Seattle's rewarding a guy who did really well for the American League club?
Look, I'm always intrigued to see what the next version of a coach looks like, right? Like, This is a guy who's gone 7 years between NHL head coaching gigs, and he wore the stink of the Buffalo Sabres for a long time. He gets fired in Pittsburgh. They bring in Mike Johnson, and then they finally get to Mike Sullivan, and then they win 2 Stanley Cups in a row. And it's like, geez, Dan Bilesma, you couldn't accomplish during a pretty lengthy period of time after winning the first cup in 2009 what Mike Sullivan then came in and did. But here's the common thread between Bilesma and Sullivan is that Mike Sullivan got an opportunity as a first-time head coach in the NHL and then went back to the AHL for a really long time. And when he came back, he was a different coach. And you heard some of that already from Sheldon Keefe today in his introductory press conference with the New Jersey Devils, which is, I've been through 5 years of coaching the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm a way better coach now than I was when I first started. Dan Bilesma is 15 years gone by now since he won a Stanley Cup in Pittsburgh. He's probably a way better and different coach now. The curious part for me, and Seattle and Ron Francis have known him and worked with him for a while, coaching in the AHL. They've had a lot of success in Coachella Valley. They're playing in the Western Conference Final, Game 1 Wednesday night, and they got to the final last year and lost to the Hershey Bears. They've had success there. They've worked with him. I guess the surprising part for me is that they didn't have a search. Like, this was kind of always the guy, much like Scott Arniel, even though they did hold 2 additional interviews in Winnipeg. He was always kind of the guy. And so be curious to see, what do they know that the rest of us don't? What's going to be different about Dan Bilesma this time around?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You mentioned wearing the stink of Buffalo a little bit, and that kind of pushed him to the outside when it comes to the retread hires, right? You think about how fast guys like Keefe have been able to jump back into new roles. Just while we're on the coaching topic, Sheldon Keefe had his introductory press conference today. Anything stand out from you? I thought it was really interesting to see the way he talked about mentally. You know, he didn't sleep the night before getting the call from Toronto, kind of saying, and I'm paraphrasing, like, I knew it was coming, didn't get a great rest, but he came to peace with it really fast. And that's what kind of sparked his interest in that Devils gig.
Well, first off, this is a really exciting opportunity. Yeah. You've got a Devils team that's got some great players, that has a young defense core on the way that I think could be really good if they can finally just get some goaltending. So that's part of it, is the excitement of the opportunity. Part of it too is, I'm sure if you really injected some truth serum into Sheldon Keefe, he'd tell you that he was feeling and wearing that pressure long before getting the call. I'm sure thinking of, Game 7 in Boston the night before then. Hey, if we don't win this game tomorrow, I'm probably getting fired. Like, those are the types of things that I'm sure you think about as a coach. And there were various moments, it felt like, throughout his tenure that he might have been sort of walking the plank, at least in the media in Toronto. And so that's not always easy to deal with and wear. And to get him out of that spotlight, I think is going to be hugely important.
Yeah. Let's get back to the Pacific Division before we talk a little NHL draft with Stephen Ellis. Our off-season ahead segment today is about the Vegas Golden Knights. And we talked about Seattle. I mean, hey, they got to try contend in a Pacific Division that is not going to get any easier over the next couple of years.
The Kraken don't have any real game breakers yet either.
Exactly. You look at Vegas, man, they got a whole bunch of game breakers, but this is going to be an interesting summer for Kelly McCrimmon and company in Vegas. Right now, with LTIR space, they have about $5.9 million to spend, and
which is like the most that they've kind of had in a long time.
But you look at this list of players, Frank, and the UFAs: Stevenson, important guy; Marchessault, 40-goal guy; Mantha, deadline pickup. I would imagine they're just going to view that as a pure rental. You see some guys lower down the lineup, the Dorofeevs, Amadios, and Carriers. But when you look at this list, we've kind of thought for a while that Jonathan Marchessault is going to be the odd man out, Frank. Is it Chandler Stevenson they're going to choose to spend this money on? How do you think they use that $5.9 million is the big question.
I think they're going to try and do everything they can to keep Marchessault.
Okay.
I mean, I don't understand math-wise. My calculator isn't big enough to understand how they could possibly find a way to make that work. I mean, who are you going to say goodbye to from your current team in order to then find the cash flow necessary to keep Marchessault? I don't see it. But then I'm looking at Chandler Stevenson and, a hugely important piece there. Stevenson slid up to the top 10 on my top 75 free agents board because I put the first one out and a couple teams called me. They're like, hey, you have Chandler Stevenson way too low.
Oh, they were whispering.
Well, they're like, what are you missing? Like, this guy's been unbelievable. He's been an all-star for the Vegas Golden Knights, and you're not talking about him more. There's two critical key pieces. You've got Marchessault, an original Golden Misfit, the MVP, the Conn Smythe winner in the playoffs, who, by the way, doesn't look like he's slowing down at all or showing any signs of aging after a career year. He crushes his contract year. How do you not bring him back?
Yeah, I mean, again, $5.9 million with the LTIR space. So it's $900K in cap space, then the $5 million they'll get from Robin Leonard going to a long-term injured reserve. And with that number, like I'm looking at their cap friendly right now, they have 11 forwards, they have 7 defensemen and 2 goalies included in that. So like you hypothetically could spend all 5.9 million of that on one piece, and that one piece could be Jonathan Marchessault. So I would imagine he could get more on the open market, but maybe it's something with your Vegas where you're going, hey, yeah, you could go get, a Pavelski like deal where it's 3 times 7, say, and that'll get you $21 million. If you're Vegas, maybe you go to him with term and you say, listen, we're not going to love years 4, 5, and 6 maybe of this deal.
We're going to want to stab our eyes out.
But is it worth it in the short term? And it feels like something they would do to go, you can get 21 million over 3 years on the open market. How about 5x5? Make yourself 25 million and you're a Golden Knight for the rest of your career.
It's probably at the end of the day for Marchessault just about total dollars, like it is for any player.
Yeah.
You don't really care how you get there, how long it takes for you to get there. If you're in a comfortable situation where you love living there, your family loves it there, it makes it even easier to say, I don't know, wink, wink, even if I'm on LTIR or whatever the last year or two, I'll make it work. Then that means you're probably definitely saying goodbye to Stevenson, right?
Yeah. But you have Hurdle next year down the middle.
And Stevenson is not that young, right? 30.
So it's not like a 33-year-old.
I guess Hurdle maybe is the replacement for Stevenson.
And your center depth next year is still Eichel, Hurdle, Carlson. Pretty good.
Yes. Yeah, you could talk me into that. But it's still going to be, the point is it's going to be really tight.
It is. Yeah. Tough
and
one.
they've made really hard decisions. Riley Smith was last year's guy.
Yep.
That was on the heels of a cup. And they've every year, Fleury, Stasny, whoever it's been Pacioretty. It's been like, we've got to make hard choices. And that's been, I think, the real hallmark of their franchise existence. They fight like hell to bring guys in. They're aggressive. They go out and get the big fish. And then they also have to throw a few off the boat every now and again.
Mm-hmm. All right. We're running a little late, so let's get to our draft talk for the day. It's the next wave with Stephen Ellis. Stephen Ellis, our daily face-off prospect analyst, joins us. We're digging into the latest draft rankings. We're up now at dailyfaceoff.com. Stephen, and my favorite question to ask you, especially as we get to your final rankings here, and we are a month away from the NHL draft at the Sphere in Las Vegas, but who's rocketing up the board, Mr. Ellis? Who's your biggest riser?
Well, mine for sure is Stian Solberg out of Norway, and watching him play at the World Championship kind of really solidified that for me. The big thing for me, like I have him at number 21. I had him outside of the first round pretty much the entire season, and for a big portion, it was outside of the second round, actually. And the big reason why for that was, as good as he was defensively, he's not much of an offensive defenseman, and he is prone to be taking some dumb penalties. But just kind of watching him mature, not only in the last couple months of the pro season in Norway, but then also watching him at the World Championship, you just saw a guy that defensively looks NHL ready already. And this is a good defensive group. We're talking so many great talents that are going to be going early in this draft, but from a pure defensive standpoint, watching him play 24 minutes a night at the World Championship is no small feat. Norway really kind of relied on their older guys at that tournament to take a lot of the opportunities up front. But on defense, they just didn't have many guys who could take over. And the minute they put Solberg in that role, just showed a guy that was mature, smart. Again, outside of those penalties that are like, some stupid tripping or maybe some cross-checking penalties, if you can remove that from the game, he's about as complete of a defensive defenseman as you're going to get. And he's got a great shot too. It's just kind of leveraging that and using that more to his advantage.
All right. So the inverse of that, Stephen, then is who's the guy that's fallen down your board the most?
Yeah, for me, it's Ryerson Leanders, and a guy that I think a lot of people look at.
Not Cole Yzerman.
Nope, not Cole Yzerman, because I'm still going high on him. I still really believe in Cole Yzerman. I think that a lot of the defensive issues that people kind of look at there are just, I don't think it's as bad as some people make it seem. And getting to watch him up close in person a lot this year really made me think, yeah, I still believe in Yzerman. You're not going to be paying him in the NHL to be a defensive player. You're paying him to score, and he's best prospect in the draft at doing that. But in terms of the guy who really fell down for me was Ryerson Leanders, outside of my top 70, which I think earlier in the year, I was thinking this guy could potentially go first round. And I really do think Leanders could still really bounce back here. Just that second half of the year where he got outplayed by his goalie partner, Jack Ivankovich, didn't really help. He's not a big goalie, but watching him play at the CHL Top Prospects game and then at the U18s, I know those are just showcase events essentially, but when he had to be good, he was good. It was just consistently doing that I think was difficult. It felt like he couldn't, perform back-to-back games very well. But I think in a year where there's not a ton of great goalies, Leanders has unfortunately fallen a little bit.
I want to go a little off script here, and I want to ask you about TJ Ginla. He's number 11 on your board, and he's kind of remained in that same general area for a while now. But you look at some other people and their draft lists, and he's now in the top 5, and he's had a magical season. Why has he remained at 11 for you?
Watching him, again, I'll just use the U18s as an example. Someone there that I had really high hopes for and thought he just had a good, not spectacular tournament. I'm not sure he's a guy that's going to be a first-line player and can kind of take it forward. You see those goals, but he also did that on a team where there were not many other scoring options. He had to be that guy. I don't know if he is that guy in the NHL. I think there's a big argument for it to be made here that he can actually find a ton of value as a middle six player because he puts that full, the full defense or full aggressive play out there. He's not going to go out there and just start killing players, but he's going to be a hard, difficult player to play against. I just don't know if he's the all-around offensive creative player that's going to be able to take that step. When, you look at here, I do have Cole Yzerman one spot forward because, again, you're not going to find a better goal scorer. Look at Consta Helenius. I have him higher. I really do believe in Consta Helenius. I know a lot of people have him outside the top 10. I almost feel like I put him low at 9 because he's just an all-around player that can kind of do a bit of everything. You look at Caden Lidstrom. I think he's a number 1 center with that big size. Berkeley Catton is just so skilled. There's just elements that I think that are going to translate over to the NHL in a more prominent way with those guys than Ginla. I had Ginla going higher in my mock draft because I do see why teams like him. It's just there are guys that I think could just do a bit more at the NHL level in more effective ways on the top line that will make them better players.
It's also a bloodlines thing, right? Like, I mean, we're also seeing, you see this season come together for him. You see the compete. And like the first thing I think of if we're thinking bloodlines is like, why can't he be the next Brady Tkachuk? Is that an unfair ask?
No, it's not. He's gonna. I still think the physical side of things. He's willing to do it, but I feel like it's not. It's almost still not second nature for him. Like watching him play compared to Malcolm Spence at the U18s, where that guy was going out there to kill everybody on the ice and was entertaining to watch. We didn't see kind of that killer instinct out of Ginla because he is a goal scorer, but my concern is, are you getting, if he's not scoring goals, if you're not putting him on the power play to score goals in the NHL, are you just looking at a guy who's maybe at best a second, third line player? And that is a real threat there because, we did see huge steps in his game, but I almost feel like he's kind of hit the plateau. I don't know how much higher he's going to go in terms of being a better offensive player, but I want to see a bit more nastiness out of there. I want him to be out there and trying to take guys out of the game. Like we saw Brady Tkachuk at the World Championship talking about how he wishes there was fighting there. I want that same energy out of Ginla. I think it's possible, but again, there's just some guys I like more.
So is he the biggest wild card for you in the top 15, or who? Like, meaning he could go anywhere, or you think he's going to end up going somewhere high? And if not, then who is the biggest wild card?
I think it's got to be Cole Yzerman. Because if I'm Montreal, this is maybe a hot take. If I'm Montreal, I'm taking a chance on Cole Yzerman at number 5. I know I'm probably alone on that, but again, you just got that shot there that just you're not going to find guys being able to replicate that. And I think from talking to scouts of the U18s, I don't think they see Cole Yzerman's deficiencies the same way other like more public people are saying, where it's like, oh, look, he doesn't do a whole lot defensively. But it's like we saw Connor Bedard this year not play a lot of defense. He was still extremely effective. And I'm not comparing, obviously, Cole Yzerman and Connor Bedard, but you can massage a role for a guy like Cole Yzerman to go out there and just say, hey, you know what, your role, we're going to put you on the power play. We're going to just have you stand out there and fire shots. It's going to work out. And, I think that was kind of the thing with Patrick Laine, and then they try to make him do a bit too much over the last couple of years, and it really hasn't been that thing. If you just give that concentrated role of Yzerman, I think he's going to be able to put up 40 goals a year, no problem. But again, it's whether or not the teams want a more well-rounded pick. And for sure, Iginla is the more well-rounded guy. I just like betting on upside. And a guy who could score 50, 60 goals a year like Cole Yzerman, that's what I'm betting on.
Man, Stephen, I'm looking at my list here. I have 5 or 6 more questions I'd love to ask you. And the nice part is that we're going to be doing this every week leading up to the draft. So we got a ton to get through over the next 3-4 weeks here leading up to the big night in Vegas. Your new draft rankings is up now, dailyfaceoff.com. We're going to link that bad boy in the YouTube description of today's episode as well. The next wave with Stephen Ellis. Thanks, buddy.
1 month from today.
1 month.
Round 1.
Thanks, guys.
Daily Face-Off inbox question, hashtag AskDFO. It is brought to you by Douglas Mattress. Frank, you have no idea how happy I was to be resting my head on my Douglas mattress yesterday. It was unbelievable.
Tyler here, winner, chicken dinner, hitting all 4 time zones in North America yesterday, in the contiguous North America.
And I slept like it. You can order today at douglas.ca/DFO. Frank, this one for you.
How many airport beers did you have today? That's my inbox question of the day.
Well, so
you went, let's just recap for everyone. You went Nashville Central, Atlanta Eastern, Vancouver Pacific, back to Edmonton Mountain, all in one day.
We left our hotel in Nashville at what would have been 1 a.m. Mountain Time, and we landed in Edmonton at 5:30 Mountain Time. So you can do the math. That's 16 hours of travel. I had 3 airport beers throughout the day.
That's it.
My big regret was the day before, the day our flight got canceled. We were in one of those like premium lounges, and I was like, last day, like let's get after it a bit. And then
you went too hard.
I went too hard. Then I had to. It hurt on the come down.
Mix in a water.
Yeah, I know. Here's an Ask DFO for you from the chat, Frank. We saw the Oilers do this, and they had success with it in round 2. Any thought of Calvin Pickard in Game 4 for Chris Knoblauch?
0.
No, you're not worried about Stuart Skinner.
Nope. I thought that was one of Stuart Skinner's best games of the playoffs.
I actually
based on quality of chances, and it could have easily been 8-3.
Yep, I agree with that.
The tough part is that at the other end, you mentioned this, Jake Ottinger. That's only how many times has he given up 3?
I think that was the first road game.
That's tough.
That was a missed opportunity for sure. Let's move along to our daily bets for the day. It's brought to you by Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. Open an account today with Bet365 and use the promo code DAILY365 to bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. My same gamer for tonight, Frank, Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Final. No one in either conference final has shot the puck more than Carter Verhaeghe. I'm playing him. Also, Matt Tkachuk, Carter Verhaeghe. They've been producing a good amount for the Panthers, even though they're down 2-1 in the series. So Verhaeghe to go over on his shots. Tkachuk, Verhaeghe points. Panthers money line with that nice little early payout option from Bet365 plus 375. Frank, a nice juicy one. $20 would turn into 95.
Man, that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but everything's, call it dumbed down, right? Like Verhaeghe's shots is only at 4. He's been crushing it. You only need the 1 point from Tkachuk and Verhaeghe. So like if the Panthers win, they're probably going to score 3 to 4 goals. That's where their line is.
The gambler's fallacy. You only need only.
Do you think the Panthers bounce back tonight?
I do.
They are actually decent sized favorites.
I would be surprised if they do not go back to New York tied 4-4. Tied 2-2 after 4.
Yeah, that would be unreal to see one of these series. It'd be great if we got both of these series down to best of 3s at the final. My parlay pick on Bet365 before this was I took both series to end in 7 games.
You missed yesterday's show, but I had Panthers to win the Stanley Cup as one of my plays. They were up to plus 375.
I think they call that buy the dip.
Yes. That's what I do with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Let's wrap up the show with a little garbage time for our friends at Wendy's. They use fresh, never frozen Canadian beef in all of their burgers, whether it's a Dave Single, a Baconator, or a JBC. That beef has never seen the inside of a freezer. Shout out to Wendy's. Order today. Check out the latest deals on the Wendy's app. Frank, before the show, when we were doing our prep, we were hanging out with Dan, who runs hockeyfights.com. So it's fitting that our garbage time today is a hockey fight. We haven't gotten very many in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but in the Memorial Cup, we got this one. And what I love is the camera angle here. This is awesome. Look at this. Get on the ice. Get right up in that shot. A good old-fashioned tilt down in the Memorial Cup in Saginaw.
So I don't know exactly who is on the ice for this shot, but when I worked at TSN, we had an unbelievable guy on the Steadicam. His name is Nate. And he would always wear the white jumpsuit. And so he would blend into the ice. So I'll tell you, there's a number of things required in order to pull something like this off. One, you need the vision. And that comes from Paul Graham at TSN, who's always pushing the envelope to try and what's the next iteration, whether it was ref cam or whether it was the on ice camera. They were always out there at World Juniors for the puck drop. And then the guy would skate back. And it's just a bunch of cool different shots that you could get. It takes a great camera operator who knows how to skate, knows the game, understands when's the moment. But more than anything, it takes a willing participant in the league. You need, whether it's World Juniors, whether it's something like this, the Mem Cup and the CHL, you need a willing participant that's like, yeah, you can send a guy onto the ice during a fight. Like, think about that. Like, you're asking for a pretty significant amount of trust in order to pull something like that off. I'd love to see the NHL be able to take some steps further to try and better the broadcast and bring fans into it just like that. I think there's a safe way to do it. But man, it's the reward, the shot is so awesome.
Unbelievable.
So big shout out to TSN and the work that they do. They're always trying to do something a little different, but sometimes you get pushback from the league to not want to do that.
Yeah. Okay, before we wrap up, want to remind everybody that the Daily Faceoff Playoff Parlay Challenge is still going down at dailyfaceoff.com. Head to the site, top right corner, hit DFO games, try to predict how game 4 is going to go tonight with everything from total goals, money line, player props, all of that stuff. Predict it, and you could win daily prizes, round prizes, grand prizes, tons to give away on the Playoff Parlay Challenge. Also today at the site, Frank's got a Darnell Nurse piece up. Steven's got the draft rankings. There is a ton going on, even though there are only 4 teams left in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The hockey world is buzzing right now. We'll be back tomorrow for another Wednesday edition of the show where we'll get set for game 4 between the Oilers and Stars, Panthers, Rangers recap, all of that good stuff. And we hope to see you then tomorrow at noon Eastern.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.